Why the U.S. and Israel struck Iran, the intelligence, the timing, and what happened next. On February 28, 2026, after months and years of rising tensions, the United States and Israel launched a coordinated military campaign against Iran. What began as precision strikes quickly transformed into one of the most consequential confrontations of the 21st century. The operation, dubbed Operation Lion's Roar by Israeli authorities and supported by U.S. military planners, was not an accident or a snap decision. It was a result of months of escalating confrontation, intense intelligence gathering, and a belief shared by U.S. and Israeli leaders that they were facing a rapidly deteriorating threat environment. Why the strike happened? The strategic case. According to senior U.S. officials, including statements released after the strikes, Washington had credible intelligence indicating that Iran was preparing to launch preemptive missile strikes against U.S. interests and allies across the region. From this perspective, leaving Tehran unchallenged, while Iranian ballistic and cruise missiles were already pointed at key targets, was seen as a strategic risk too great to allow. The U.S. position, strongly echoed by Israeli leaders, was simple. Iran's missile arsenals, nuclear ambitions, and support for militant proxies pose an existential threat to Israel, to the United States, and to regional security overall. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been a vocal advocate of taking direct action against Iran's leadership and nuclear infrastructure for years. According to financial and diplomatic reporting, Netanyahu influenced Washington to support regime-targeted tactics rather than only negotiations. From the U.S. side, the strike was cast as preventive, not reactive, undertaken to stop a missile barrage that intelligence analysts believed could be unleashed imminently. Planning and intelligence behind the strike. This strike was shaped by unprecedented coordination between U.S. and Israeli intelligence agencies. For months, analysts tracked Iranian missile deployments, strategic leadership movements, and nuclear enrichment activity. Satellite imagery, signals intelligence, and human sources reportedly provided the data needed to pinpoint when Iran's senior commanders will be most vulnerable and when Tehran's missile units will be most ready to fire. Political negotiation efforts, including rounds of talks in Muscat, Rome, and Geneva aimed at curbing Iran's nuclear ambitions and missile program, had collapsed just days earlier, leaving military options at the forefront. Senior planners saw a convergence of factors: Iran's advancing missile and nuclear potential, the lack of diplomatic progress, and signals that Tehran might strike first. That conjunction, officials argued, justified decisive action on that specific day. The strikes and what was hit. In the early hours of February 28, U.S. and Israeli forces launched waves of coordinated strikes on Iran. Targets included key military infrastructure and air defense systems. Iran internal security headquarters in Tehran completely destroyed. Ballistic missile sites and launch facilities. Strategic government compounds where leadership meetings were expected to occur. Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, who ruled since 1989, was killed on the first day of the attacks on Tehran, a historic moment confirmed by Iranian state media and multiple governments. He was 86, and the attack hit his compound in central Tehran. State media also reported that members of his family, including his daughter, son-in-law, and granddaughter, were killed in the same attack. Reporters and monitoring agencies also noted damage to civilian infrastructure, including explosions reported in a school with several casualties, stoking international concerns about civilian casualties. U.S. and Israeli defense of the action. At an emergency United Nations Security Council session, U.S. and Israeli representatives insisted their actions were lawful and necessary, aimed not at expansion but at neutralizing an imminent threat and preventing Iran from acquiring devastating weapons. The U.S. ambassador to the UN stated the strikes were defensive measures to uphold global security. Iran's ambassador responded by labeling the attacks crimes against humanity. Immediate Iranian retaliation. Almost instantly, Iran responded with a barrage of missiles and drones targeting Israel, triggering sirens and air defense activations at U.S. military bases across the Gulf, including in Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, and Iraq. Some U.S. personnel are being killed in action, also Arab neighbors allied with the U.S. and Israel. In the UAE, Iran's retaliatory strikes were intercepted, but debris from intercepted missiles caused damage to high-profile sites, including the iconic Burj Al Arab Hotel in Dubai. Civilian centers such as Jebel Ali Port in Dubai have seen plumes of smoke and reported impact damage and disruptions at airports. Gulf states such as Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, Bahrain, and Iraq also reported strikes or intercepted Iran's long-range missiles and drones. Casualties and chaos. Iranian sources and international monitors reported hundreds of deaths and injuries inside Iran from the initial strikes, including children and civilian targets. U.S. military officials said American forces had successfully defended against incoming Iranian missiles, but there has been fatality among the active American military personnel. Regional air travel was widely disrupted as airspace closures were enacted across the Gulf. Political shakeup in Iran. With Khamenei's death confirmed, Iran's clerical establishment moved swiftly to fill the vacuum. Reporters have indicated that Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, a senior cleric, has been appointed as acting supreme leader under constitutional provisions, as the regime works to stabilize its leadership amid war and internal pressure. Bigger picture, strategic, political, and historical significance. This strike represents a historic moment in Middle Eastern geopolitics. It marks one of the few times the world has seen a de facto decapitation strike against a sitting head of state. It reflects a dramatic shift from diplomatic negotiations to overt military confrontation involving major powers. It may redefine regional alliances, security postures, and the future of nuclear diplomacy. From a strategic viewpoint, U.S. and Israeli leaders argue the message was not just military, it was existential. That the potential for an Iranian first strike under conditions of nuclear or conventional escalation was intolerable. At the United Nations and among global powers, reactions highlight a clash between perceived self-defense and international norms against preemptive use of force. Will Iran consolidate power and strike back harder? Will internal fractures reshape its future? Or has this moment set the Middle East and the world on an irreversible path toward wider war?